Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
How can you tell if you're suffering from addiction or just have bad habits? Is there anything we can do about it? Mission Evolution Radio TV show is coming to you around the world on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. With us this hour to discuss addiction and the use of mindfulness to overcome it is Vimalasara Mason-John. Valerie is founding facilitator of Compassionate Inquiry and the author of 10 books, including the award-winning 8-Step Recovery Using the Buddha's Teaching to Overcome Addiction and Detox Your Heart, Meditations for Emotional Trauma. Vimalasara is a co-founder of the training program Mindfulness Based Addiction Recovery, which was delivered in both English and Spanish. Mason-John works as a public speaker in the field of mindfulness for addiction and trauma. Visit her website, ValerieMason-John.com. Valerie, thanks for joining us on Mission Evolution.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me, Gwilda. Am I saying your name correctly?
You are. Am I butchering yours?
No, you did a good job, but you can just call me Valerie. But you did a good job.
That'll do. Valerie, what's your educational background?
Oh, my educational background. Life. 101 life.
There's that always.
But yeah, I have a master's in creative writing and education and the arts, and I was awarded an honorary doctorate for my lifetime achievements for the contribution to the African Asian diaspora in the UK. I now live in Canada, so that was my past life. In fact, I'm back in the UK because I had some work being profiled in the Tate Modern next month.
Oh, great. So how did you become interested in addiction?
You know, that's really interesting. I was working for an organization then in England called Clean Break, which worked with women who have been incarcerated and women who chose to go to rehab instead of actually going to prison. And so we were given the contract to deliver a program on anger management for those women. And all of those women had committed crimes under the influence of drugs or alcohol. And so I think in a way that was really actually, Gwilda, where I started thinking about addiction, because I can remember one of the women saying, it's not possible to stop drinking. And I remember thinking, I don't know whether it is possible or not. I wasn't an alcoholic, but I didn't know. Is it possible? So I thought, okay, I'll see if I can stop. I was a champagne. Everybody knew me. I was a champagne person, blah, blah, blah. And it was interesting. And I let go, and I don't have alcohol in my life now, but it was very interesting actually working in that field and somebody saying, it's not possible. Is it possible? And I just really thought, if I'm working in that field, I need to know more. And that really set me on the path of working in the field of addiction. And then the other thing I would say is that my publisher asked me if I had another book after writing Detox Your Heart. And then I thought, yeah, I'd like to share my recovery, because I had disordered eating. I was an extreme bulimic anorectic, Gwilda, many moons ago.
Oh, that's terrible. Terrible to live through. I understand that it's really hard to beat too.
It is. I talk about the hell realm of addiction. And, you know, sometimes people say, oh, food, how can that be an addiction? And I'm just saying, it really is. You know, there was a point where I couldn't even walk past a bakery without not going in and buying and binging and purging. It's a terrible dis-ease, a terrible illness. Yeah.
So what is addiction? You know, most people think drugs and alcohol, but apparently one can be addicted to a lot of different things.
Yeah, that's really interesting. How do we define addiction, and what is addiction? Um, I in a way, I try to steer clear away of diagnosis, because in a way then people tend to think, oh, that's got nothing to do with me. And I think in a way that I would say that it's part of the human condition that we are going to have habitual behaviors, and it's on a spectrum, it's on a continuum. And so, for some people, they have habits, unhealthy habits, and there are some people who have habits where it's a matter of life and death. And then there's that gray area in between. And if somebody is listening thinking, well, okay, that's still a bit of a loose definition, I would say that I love the 4 C's of addiction. And I think that if you have a compulsion, a compulsion to look at the internet all the time. I mean, internet behavior. It's something that so many people talk about. Like, I'm addicted to the internet. They're scrolling on their phone. So if you have a compulsion, or if you have a craving to pick up something, or if you if you're doing something and there are consequences, negative consequences, and you still continue to do it, or if you experience being out of control of a certain behavior, if you have any one of those, I would say that actually you are at prey to an addictive behavior. And I do want to see that. I think there's a bad press about, oh, somebody's got addiction, they're really bad. We have to really see that addictive behaviors are often adaptations. They're often normal responses to abnormal things that were happening in childhood. And I think this is really, really important. I would say that actually that there are many people who have addictions that in their childhood had no healthy attachment. Their attachment, because their parents were so dysfunctional, had no healthy attachment to give them some joy, some peace and love. And so at some point they start attaching to that negative stinking thinking in their head. And as they get older, they discover alcohol, they discover marijuana, they discover porn, they discover sex, they discover all these things that in the short term give them joy, give them happiness. So I really want to say that, because it's so important not to demonize addictive behaviors.
What are some of the things that people are addicted to that might surprise our listeners?
Ah, that is a really interesting question. And I would say we are addicted to our thinking. That was something, Gwilda, that I really realized for myself when I was able to let go of some of those gross addictions. I can remember waking up in my bed and thinking, oh my God, I am addicted to my stinking thinking. I could really see all this negative talk. And often this negative talk isn't our voice, it's the voice of adults or even siblings which were in our head as a child, and we begin believing them. And actually often we turn to that, because like self-hatred, often that stinking thinking is so full of self-hatred. I can remember I was so addicted to, I hate myself.
Mm.
And why was I addicted to it? Because nobody could hate me as much as I could hate myself. Nobody could hurt me as much as I could harm myself. And often people live in their head. They're not living in the world, they live in their head. They're holding on to the stories of the trauma and the drama that they had in their childhood. So that's something that I think people can be really surprised at, that they are addicted to their thinking.
Also addicted to their suffering, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because if we look at the Buddhist teachings and we look at when the Prince Siddhartha became awake. I mean, the word Buddha means awake. When the Prince Siddhartha became awake, it said that his first discourse said there was addiction to hedonism, which was lowly, coarse, and unprofitable, and there was addiction to self-mortification, And that self-mortification is that suffering aspect, which is also lowly, coarse, and unprofitable. And what we need is the middle way. So yeah, some people are addicted to their suffering. Yeah.
That's just a scary thing, because if you're addicted to it, you're going to spend your whole life suffering, really, because you create it, don't you?
Well, this is the thing, isn't there? There is that we're all going to suffer. That in this, it's not that life is suffering, and I think this was really important for me because I actually thought that there was something wrong with me because I was deeply suffering. So in a way, I think often, in a way, I tend to think of suffering more of a malady, and actually, it wasn't until I read one of the Buddhist teachings, the First Noble Truth, that said that this life will bring suffering. Not that life is suffering, but because we're born into this human condition, because we will age, because we will get sick, because we will die, we will suffer. And we call that the first start of suffering. We cannot avoid suffering. We can't. It's like if your loved one, Gwilda, dies, you're going to suffer. There's going to be pain. However, what we get addicted to is what we call that second arrow or that second dart of suffering. And that's the story of it's not fair, it shouldn't have happened to me, something's wrong with me, life is crap, etc. And that's what we get more addicted to because the first dart has gone.
Got it.
It's no
Well,
longer there.
well, it's time for us to take a station break. Valerie and I will return very shortly, so don't go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org, and we're coming to you around the world on the X Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. Are you an addict, or do you just have bad habits? With us this hour discussing addiction is Vimalasara Mason-John. Valerie is the author of 10 books, including First Aid Kit for the Mind, Breaking the Cycle of Habitual Behaviors. So there is a $64 question. How can a person tell if they just have bad habits or if they're actually wrestling with an addiction?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I always say when somebody asks me that, is it causing you misery? Is it causing somebody else misery? For example, as I said, I had disordered eating. I'm not bulimic or anorectic anymore. And I still have a neurotic behavior. Like I was addicted to seaweed and then it was chewing gum and then it was raw cashew nuts and it was causing me misery. It was, Gwilda, I don't know if you know those people who can buy a bar of chocolate and just have one square. And
That's not me.
exactly. Yeah. I don't know. I think they're the people who's got something wrong with them. But it's the same, somebody who can have a glass of wine and forget about it, forget about the bottle. So in a way, what I say to people is it causing you misery? And you might say no. Is it causing other people misery? Is it causing other people harm? And some people may say yes to that. And so in a way, it's for you to look at that. But I do want to say that I think it's Carl Hart who talks about drugs for sensible adult use. So it's like, if you drink, it doesn't mean to say that you're an alcoholic. And there are some people who drink and they may drink once a week, but something difficult happens and they have a bit more than what they need to. However, there are some people who, whenever they drink, they just can't stop. Or there are some people who are real binge drinkers, so they think, oh yeah, it's that stop start. Well, I'm a binge drinker, I don't have an issue. But I say, well, if you are a binger, then you obviously do have an issue because when you're binging, you can't stop. So in a way, I really think it's really important for people to self-identify, because what I found in terms of my work, it's no use dragging somebody along for help if they don't acknowledge that they need help or they want help. And also as well, it's very interesting. Sometimes I have partners or parents who say, I really wish you could help me. My partner or my child has a drinking habit. They won't stop. Is there anything you can do? And I say to them, well, do you drink? And they say, oh, no, I don't have a problem. And I say, no, I'm just asking, do you drink? Because they want to know what they can do to help. And they say, no, I don't have a problem. No, I'm not saying you have a problem, but do you drink? And they say, yes, I might have 1 or 2 glasses. And I say, well, if you want to help that person, how about you stop drinking? Because then you model that. And they say, no, 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 I don't have a problem. And then I say, well, there you are. You think it's easy for somebody who's got the problem to stop drinking, and you're saying you don't have a problem, and you find it difficult to stop drinking. So again, I think it really is for people to self-identify. But I will come back to, in a way, if you really do want to assess if you have an issue with a behavior, and I don't just want to demonize drinking, because there's drink, there's food, there's alcohol, there's drugs, there's all these behaviors. Do you have a compulsion that takes over you? Are you out of control? Yeah. Or do you still keep on using despite those negative consequences? So it's really important for us to self-identify. And also craving. Do you have craving? Are you sitting there on your hands thinking, oh my God, I can't, internet shopping is another one. It's like when you go on the internet, do you find yourself down that rabbit hole buying all this stuff?
Yeah,
So,
it's amazing, and it seems like we can skip from one thing to another. We might say, "Oh, I'm going to stop that because it might be an addiction and it's not doing me any favors." But it seems like we just replace it with something else.
exactly.
Sugar. You quit
Mm,
drinking, you start eating sugar like crazy. Well,
yeah,
it's debatable which one of those is going to kill you first.
sure.
So,
Yeah.
see, Valerie, what is process addiction?
Process addictions are more those things like sex addiction is more seen as a process addiction if it's not combined with drugs, because there is an addiction called gym sex, which is something that in some of the male communities, more often it's in all communities, but dominant in male communities. I think process addictions like gambling is seen more of a process addiction. In fact, actually, the diagnostic manual statistics, the DMS, has actually finally listed that gambling and also grief. I wouldn't say grief as an addiction, but has listed that too. So it's all those behaviours. I think food also comes under process addictions as well. Whereas traditionally we think of addictions as the drugs. Yeah,
Right, we do. We think if it's drugs or it's alcohol, then it's an addiction. Otherwise, it's just
yeah,
we had
yeah.
habits, right? So,
So
um,
again, shopping, surfing the internet, all of those are seen as process addictions. Yeah.
so you speak of mindfulness. Would you define it for us, as we'll be speaking of it today? I think it's a large part of what we're looking at here, isn't it?
Defining mindfulness. Is that what you asked me to define
Mm-hmm.
mindfulness?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, firstly, I'd like to say that mindfulness transformed my life. And mindfulness is everything, or can be everything that we do. We tend to think of mindfulness being sitting cross-legged with your fingers like this, or with your hands like this, and in meditation. Yeah. And that can be a part of mindfulness. Let's talk about the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So there's mindfulness of the body, being aware of the body, and often we're not aware of the body. We're split from the body. Nobody is home. And the reason why nobody is home in the body, because we're so traumatized as young people, we've left the body. It's safer to be out of the body. So in a way, mindfulness is teaching us to come home to the body. Yeah,
So,
really. Yeah.
yeah, if we can't be present in our body, we can't be present in our world, can we?
Well, the awareness is always there. Yeah. So in a way, it's true. If we're not, if we can't be present in the body, where are we present? And I would say that often we're present in our addictive and compulsive behaviors. Yeah. We're
And then
present. We're present to that. Yeah.
isn't it also necessary to be in the body to be in the present? Otherwise, you're rehashing your history or dreading your future.
Yeah, that's a really good analysis. What I would say is, it again, that awareness is always there. So in a way, even if we turn to the alcohol, I mean, some people will say, oh, I will be mindful smoking a cigarette. Okay. And people can be really present to smoking a cigarette, but then they will go into denial in terms of what is actually happening. So we talk about there's mindfulness of body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of thoughts, and then mindfulness of that whole human condition, aging, sickness, and death. And what I would say is it's like actually they are different doorways. So to try and get somebody into their body could be the most traumatic thing that we can do, especially if they come from a very traumatic physical assault background or sexual assault background. However, could we help them to become mindful of their thoughts? And that could be a doorway into. So that's why I'm kind of pushing back that no, it doesn't have to always just be in the body. Sometimes we get people to come back to their body because we get them to become mindful of their thoughts, mindful of their thinking, noticing what's actually happening, which can then bring them back to the body. Yeah.
If once you start getting mindful of your thoughts, of your emotions, of your body, does that make it easier to access the underlying problem behind any addiction?
Great question. I know many, many people who have have defined or labeled themselves as of having issues with alcohol. And when they've let go of the alcohol, they've had to come into relationship with the depression. And often the depression is manifested through the thoughts, through the attacking thoughts. And so actually, what we're aware of is that people had turned to the alcohol to silence the thoughts so that they didn't have to be with the attacking thoughts. So it's really hard. It's what I would say is that it's a lot more easier to work with those thoughts without suppressing them with a addictive or compulsive behavior. It's so much more harder to deal with that stuff if you're in the food, if you're in the alcohol, if you're in the drugs, if you're in the porn, if you're in the sex. So much harder. And
Does it serve as a distraction from accessing and processing the underlying problem?
it does serve as a distraction, and distraction is good, but the problem is that people don't come back. And I love to use the example of kids because I've worked with children, and it's great in school. We give kids time out. When a kid says, I'm struggling, I want time out, we give them time out, and they know they have to come back into the space again. And when they come back into the space, they're more regulated. However, what happens is adults, we want to distract, but we don't come back because it's so seductive. We've distracted and then we get lost in the behavior and had no intention of coming back.
Well, it's about time for us to take another station break. But when we get back, I would like to talk more about coming back and what prevents us from it. Valerie and I will be back to continue this discussion. So you stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Are we nothing more than our thoughts and feelings? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing the power of thought is Valerie Mason-John. Her website, ValerieMason-John.com. Valerie, we were talking about being mindful of what your emotions are, being mindful of what your feelings are, being mindful of being in your body. But is there something underneath all of that? Once we're mindful that, well, I'm thinking all these thoughts, but I don't know that they're mine. Is there a hidden identity once you start digging around in there?
A hidden identity. So I love your questions. In a way, those thoughts and that thinking we have often creates an identity, and we think that is us. And actually, what happens? What happens if we let go of that thinking? What happens if we let go of those thoughts? Who would we be? And that is often the scary part, because I think, as you're saying before the break, why don't we let go of these things? Well, we don't let go of these things because these are behaviors that have protected us. These are behaviors that have kept people safe. These are behaviors that have kept people out. So who would I be if we let go of all of this? And that is really scary, especially if that's been your identity for so many years, you know. And also, it's like you let go of that. Do you have to start taking responsibility? You know, sometimes,
Anything but that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Sometimes we have these behaviors because it's like pulling the covers over our head and going to sleep, and we don't have to think about anything. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, you know, you take the covers off, you let go of these behaviors, and you have to start being responsible.
Isn't there a certain amount of bombardment when we set aside the habits or the addictions and are confronted with what's lying underneath them?
There is, and so I often say that actually people who are really struggling with behaviors, then it's important to have some help, that you don't have to do it on your own. I would say for myself, if I had reached out for help a lot earlier, I don't think that I would have been in my disordered eating for so long. And I think there's something again that we tend to think something is wrong with us because we can't get it together, we can't stop, and we give ourselves a hard time, and there's this shame and guilt. And I think for me, what I've realized and what many people realize is it's not about what's wrong with us, it's like what happened to us is the question. And if we could really step into that, there's a very beautiful teaching that the shamans that the shamans talk about, that it's said that when somebody is spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally sick, that they're taken to a shaman, they're taken to the healer. And the healer will ask a series of questions. And the first question is, you know, when did you stop singing? So again, it's like not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you? When did you lose your voice? You
Mhm.
may have literally stopped singing because somebody said, shut up, you have a terrible voice. That may have happened. But there are many ways that we can lose our voice. You know, when adults don't listen to us. And then there's the question of when did you stop dancing? And again, that play, when did you stop dancing? We know that actually if young children experience sexual abuse or physical abuse, the play goes, they stop dancing. They go inwards. They lose something. Or we know when a parent says, I'll give you something to make you cry, you know, shut up or I'll give you something to make you cry. Or when a parent says, man up, stop acting like a sissy. Yeah. Or when people start looking at your body inappropriately, start touching. Those are all things that stop us from dancing. Yeah. And that's why we can turn to these addictive behaviors. And the third question is, when did you stop being enchanted by your own story? And there are many people who so traumatized. I mean, I think of people who have to grow up in a war zone, people who have to grow up in poverty, right? You know. And then when did you stop being able to dwell in the sweet territory of silence? So of course, when we have these addictive behaviors, we're often we're trying to shut down all that noise. And it's almost as if that behavior gives us the silence because the only thing you're thinking about is the behavior, is the substance or the behavior. So
Do
yes.
those obsessions, those obsessive thoughts, the cravings, do they often are sitting on top of something else that you do is just too painful to look at?
Mm. You know, it's what it's sitting on top on, Gwilda, is like when we're activated, when we're triggered. So basically, we have six sense doors. The mind is a sense door too. So when one of the sense doors has contact with a substance, or it can be you're walking down the road and your nose has contact with the smell of cigarettes, there is going to be hedonic tone in the body. There's going to be feeling. You can't avoid feeling when there is contact. So when we get activated with contact, it could be looking at somebody's face, that your eye has contact with the face. There's a trigger and there's an unpleasant feeling arising in the body, and it's really unpleasant. Or it could be really pleasant, or it could be neutral, nothing much going on. But and often we want to move away from the hedonic tone that is being experienced into the body. And we move away from it by going into thought, by going into thinking. And we act out of that. So yes, underneath all of that is feeling, is hedonic tone in the body, which again, I didn't get through, is the foundation of what is mindfulness. There's the 4 foundations, is the foundations of body, the foundations of feelings, the foundations of thoughts, and then what we call dharmas of the reality of life. So yes, under all that thinking, under all that bombardment is the feeling in the body that we're often moving away from.
So, on the other hand, if we do become mindful and start digging through the things that we've stacked on top of what we don't want to feel or look at, isn't that the road to self discovery?
Yeah. And I do want to say that people who have had addictive behaviors, compulsive behaviors, that's been part of their self-discovery, and they can't get out of it, this loop, they're stuck. You know, it's like they've done so much self-discovery, but they can't keep on moving. And so, yes, it's the next step when we are able to become more mindful, when we are able to begin to release some of our habits, when we're able to begin to release some of those thoughts and thinking, when we can begin to release what we think about our bodies, then yes, it is another stage in that self-discovery. And in a way, that self-discovery actually is we lighten the load. Yeah. We lighten the load that we have been carrying around for so long. We become less of who we are.
I've run into some people that started drinking or with drugs or some kind of an addiction very, very young, prepubescent almost, like 11 years old, and had done it into their adulthood. And when they get sober, it's like they have missed all that developmental ages within those ages and almost have to backtrack in order to catch up with themselves. Is this a thing? And if so, how do we work with that?
You know, that's one of the things that can keep us unwell when we think like, oh, I've lost so much of my childhood. And I would say to somebody first, if I was working with somebody, to just say, look at how you survived. Look, you found a way to survive. Some of these behaviors keep us alive. You found a way to survive. It doesn't work for you anymore. And so what is it that you need to be doing? Is it needing to learn to love yourself more? And actually, you've got to a place where you can put down that behavior and learn to love yourself. And that really is okay. Yeah. Rather than thinking, you know, we missed out. Sometimes we can get stuck. We didn't get the love from our parents. Well, you know what? If you didn't get it, it's unlikely you're going to get it now. And yet, the most important love we have to do is learn to love ourselves.
We have to find ourselves first, though, don't we?
We have to. Well, actually, I developed a practice called the 4 basic needs of the heart. People didn't know that they could love themselves. And actually, no, you just start learning to pay attention to yourself, learning to give yourself some affection and appreciate yourself. And that is a way in to begin to come back home to the body, to come back home to the self.
So we're getting close to being out of time in this segment. But is there really a point whereby you aren't plagued by addictions anymore? Or is it always going to be a form of maintenance that you have to perform to stay sober or not in drugs or away from eating disorders and that sort of thing?
I believe that there is a place of no return. I do believe that. I do. What we have to remember is that the gravitational pull will become weaker, and at some point you'll have disinterest. That takes work. There is some point where you just have complete disinterest. Also, we know that there are some people who have not used, have been abstinent for 20, 30 years, and something happens and they pick back up again.
Mhm. It's so sad to see.
Yeah.
Well, it is that time for us to take another network break. Please stay with us as Valerie and I continue to explore the many faces of addiction. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Who are you really? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Valerie Mason-John. Her website, ValerieMason-John.com. Valerie, what does it mean to see through the illusion of self?
Mm. Yes, we're on to that topic, and I just want to just follow up from where we left at, and we will get back to seeing through the illusion of self. So in a way, is it possible, that question of being completely free of our addictive and compulsive behaviors, and is maintenance needed? Yeah, life changes. I think there's something about guarding the sense doors that, for myself, I don't like to be in an environment where there's alcohol and drugs 24/7. That's not conducive for me. I choose that. So there is something about guarding the sense doors. Yes, I can be in that environment for a short while, and I don't think I'm going to pick up. And however, I wouldn't want to be socializing in that context. And then just coming back to your question of what does it mean to see through the illusion of self, you asked me earlier, Gwilda, what were some of the things that might surprise people that we're addicted to. And actually, just in that break, I just thought, yes, of course, we're addicted to the self. That is our biggest addiction. We are addicted to the self. So in a way, coming to your question of what does it mean to see through the illusion of self? So coming back to your question, what is the self? What what has made up the self? Yeah. So for myself, it's like, what's made up the self? Society projects black onto me. I can identify with black. Society might project woman onto me, or queer onto me, or non-binary onto me. Do I step into those identities? So in a way, seeing through the illusion of self is firstly just seeing the stories that we live in, just seeing the fabrication. And perhaps let's look at it this way. I think it's easier to begin to understand this in the sense of, if any of you are listening and you've been in love with somebody. Yeah. And I always say, often, what are we in love with? Are we actually in love with the person, or are we in love with the story of the person? And guarantee at some point the in love breaks, because we begin to see the person who they really are, and we begin not to just see being in love with the story. So of course we can have a beautiful romantic relationship. However, we often are fabricating. We're fabricating who this person is. And so in a way, we are in relationship with the story rather than the actual person. And so again, coming back to ourselves, what is the story of you, Gwilda? What is the story of you? Yeah. If I said to you, where is Gwilda? What would you point to? Where is Gwilda? A question, where is Gwilda?
That is a good question because we're everywhere, really, aren't we?
Yeah. In infinite space, can you pinpoint where you actually are? Where is the mind? Can you really pinpoint where the mind is? Where is the interviewer? What would you be pointing to? What is the interviewer? What is Gwilda? Somebody would say Gwilda is this, somebody would say Gwilda is that. What is the truth? So in a way, that seeing through the illusion of self is one thing of seeing that we're not fixed. Okay? That we're not fixed. We are changing moment by moment by moment. Yeah. And actually, really, when we begin to see through the illusion of self, we won't be so triggered and won't be so activated. We won't experience hurt so much. Oh, they hurt me. Oh, I'm feeling this as if my feelings are part of me. Well, our feelings are separate. And guess what? Just move my hand. Guess what? We can let go of the feelings. They can drop. This is my peyote Palo Santo stick. I'm holding on to that. This is me. I'm holding on to me. This is me. But actually, if we begin to let go, yeah, and let it drop, just drop. And there is peace in that. Yeah. This is not me. This is not mine. This is not I. There is peace. When somebody hurts you, what are they hurting? They're hurting the story that we have formed in our head. When I experience being slighted, when I say I feel harmed, that's a story. That's not a feeling. Okay. And actually, what it is that somebody is trying to challenge the story of myself in my head. So what? So, and
If
that's
we're limited to the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, we become pretty shallow, don't we?
well, again, I don't want to demonize these stories and say that we become shallow, because to live in this world, we need a certain part of story. I need to know the story that if I sit on this chair, it's going to support me. Okay. So we need to, at some point, we need to kind of live in the story and also know that the story isn't true and it's not fixed. That's the thing. So so in a way, I don't want to demonize stories and say stories are really bad. All I'm saying is just check that story. Often it's not true. Yeah.
And or be able to let it evolve rather than try to cement it. So,
Exactly.
Valerie, it's that time in the program when I get to ask you, what's your mission?
What's my mission?
Hmm?
You know, my mission is the uplift of people. Really, I think I've dedicated the rest of my life to be of service to the human condition. What
Yes.
more could I say? And it is about definitely to be of service for the human condition and to help the human condition to have more freedom, to have more peace. Yeah,
Peace would be a beautiful thing, wouldn't it?
it is,
So,
and it's possible.
so tell me, do you have to be a Buddhist to be able to be mindful?
Absolutely not. Buddhists do not have the monopoly on mindfulness. In fact, actually, my teacher, the late Sangharakshita, would say, "Where does Buddhism come from?" And of course, Buddhism comes from India. That's what we know. And if we think of what was that person doing when they became mindful, when they became awake, they wasn't listening to us two having a conversation. They wasn't reading a book. They were reflecting. They were in meditation, reflecting on the mind. Anybody can be mindful. Yeah, you don't have to be a Buddhist to be mindful. You can be a Christian, you can be a Muslim, you can be a Hindu, you can be a Jew, you can be anything and be mindful. Mindfulness is a way of life. It's not a religion, it's a way of life.
You mentioned meditation. Is meditation helpful in this process to uncover the self that is underneath all the addictions and stories?
Yes, and again, coming back to one of your earlier question, what is mindfulness? Mindfulness, meditation, anything can be a meditation. Us having a conversation can be a meditation. Can I be fully present here now with you now? Can I be fully present when I'm eating my food? Can I be fully present cleaning my teeth? Can I? And of course there is this, we think about right mindfulness because it's very interesting actually. Snipers are taught mindfulness. Okay, so let's get real here. And actually, in a way, is it really mindful to take somebody's life, to harm something? No, it's not. So again, that meditation can be, it's everything, can be everything that we do.
I've heard of walking meditation, silent meditation, all sorts of different kinds of meditation. What do you think is the most effective, and are there any studies on it?
Definitely, there are lots and lots of studies on the benefit of meditation. And I would say, unfortunately, a lot of those studies are on people sitting cross legged, on a retreat, silent retreat, etc. Because meditation looks very different in different cultures. Okay, in my culture, part of meditation would be drumming. The drum would be part of dancing. Dancing is part of meditation. So again, I think often when we think of meditation, we think of sitting cross-legged, or there is walking meditation. But there is, as I say, everything is meditation, and there needs to be more studies and research on the impact of drumming, on the impact of dancing, on the impact of breath work, on these different ways. Because again, what I want to say is meditation is about being here.
If we are about out of time in the entire show, but what's your vision if everybody becomes more mindful?
Oh, if everybody was to become more mindful, would there be a need for war?
That's a good start.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we have reached that moment when we are out of time. Valerie, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom.
Oh, thank you so much for the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah. Our guest this hour has been Valerie Mason-John, the author of 11 books, including First Aid Kit for the Mind, Breaking the Cycle of Habitual Behaviors. To find out more about Valerie, where you can find their books and all they have to offer, visit their website, ValerieMason-John.com. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy past archived episodes, visit www.missionevolution.org. But please be sure to join us right here next time. This mission will continue, bringing information, resources, and support to our evolving world.